Hi, good evening. This is Candia. I hope you guys are having a nice evening today, or maybe it's morning for you if you happen to be across the planet. Tonight, I wanted to focus on some different aspects of looking at what's going on in the world from the timeline aspect, from the greater picture. Before we get there, though, as I have been doing every week, I've been pulling cards, which I don't normally do, but it's been really fun, to give us energy and a focus for the week. I use these particular cards called the Crystal Oracle deck. I'll show you it if you're at all interested. This is what it is. I know it's backwards, but there we go. And the card, ironically, that I have pulled 3 times now out of 5 weeks. How weird is that? It is the smoky quartz. So I'm thinking that obviously there is something here. The universe is telling all of us, thank you, Sheila, I so appreciate you, that we're not getting it, right? We are not picking up on. So what is smoky quartz? It's about emotional blockage. So do you have any emotional blockages that you're working through? As an example, I see so many people being incredibly angry and incredibly contentious. And it's about politics, it's about relationships, it's about all kinds of contentiousness. So if you are dealing with any kind of emotional blockages, such as contentiousness or anger, it's something that I would invite you to really look at. So what you do is you pull up the smoky quartz and use that as the integrative piece to get there. It's also about negative thoughts. Who doesn't have a few emotional thoughts right now? Negative thoughts. I can admit that I do. When you read the news, you're just going, are you kidding me? I just received some news right before I came on, and the news was incredibly dark. And it's about what's going on politically with Dominion. It has to do with the voter fraud. It has to do with the Wuhan laboratories. It has to do with adrenochrome being produced in the same laboratory as the Wuhan virus. I mean, we got some negative things. So how is it not possible to think about those things? So again, smoky quartz comes in to help protect us from these thoughts so we can observe them but not be in that world. I think this is the most important aspect right now in terms of where we are in the world, is to not be of it, be the observer. So the more you can be the observer in any kind of situation, the better off you will be and the people around you will be. So again, this is about smoky quartz helping to neutralize those negative thoughts. It's also about releasing those, so it helps to release those negative thoughts. The smoky quartz is also about grounding. So hi Trace, how are you? Thanks for being here. Since you're new, I pulled smoky quartz for the 3rd time in 5 weeks. So here we go again. But it's letting us know that we have not done the work we're supposed to. So it's all about releasing forgiveness to others, releasing negative thoughts, releasing old patterns that no longer serve you. As an example of that, I post a lot of things, as you probably know, and of course I get a lot of backlash and negativity. And there's one particular gal that I grew up with that I've known since literally 1st grade, and she is just contentious, right? So rather than getting wound up into her emotional story, I just release her, send her love. So the more you can utilize that as a gift in your world to release those negative thoughts, the better. So releasing, and then when you can and you have the opportunity, if you're not grounded, go sit under a tree, walk in the rain, walk in the snow, depending on where you are, and get connected to the earth. Very important. Even if you have plants in your office, that makes a difference, or if you have stones and crystals around you, things you can do to get grounded. Another great tip, I've used this one for years, are pennies. Now, I know we're having a shortage right now, supposed shortage. I think they want to turn us all over to a cashless society. However, if you still have some pennies, you can put pennies in your pockets because copper is very grounding. Of course, you can get a copper bracelet. You can also gather those pennies and put them between your mattresses so that when you sleep, you are more grounded. Another thing you can do is take a rock or a crystal, the larger the better, and place it under your hearing. Oh, my cat must be trying to get into my door. I can hear it going, what's going on? You can place a big rock under your bed, and that will also help to ground you. Don't you love ghosts in the machine behind me? So I'm sure that's my cat Tal. He's notorious for that. He's a bit of a slippery guy. He's a good door opener. So these are things that you can do. Put a big rock under your bed for grounding. So again, smoky quartz, I want to show it to you one more time because again, we are not getting this because I draw the cards with the energy of the week for everyone. This is not specific to myself. I do my own thing. So this is also about protection. So perhaps you are feeling frustrated with the the riots, the people beating people up. I mean, I just saw a picture today of peaceful rally gatherers, if you will. I'm not sure exactly where it was. It might have been at the Mega March over the weekend in DC that was not publicized at all, very under the cover. And no, it was in Seattle. And then a Seattle guy, Antifa guy, came up and just punched the daylights out of this guy. When you watch that, it's hard not to respond, react really. So the more that we can protect ourselves from that kind of drama, right there, releasing it and protection. So how do we protect ourselves? And how we protect ourselves is, if you recall, remember, always stay in your light and reinforce your boundaries. I know I repeat this, and repeat this. However, it is so important because when we are in our protection, we have this Teflon to the Klingons so that that negative energy doesn't impact us. So important. I can't express this enough in terms of spiritual energetic work. This is one of the best things that you can do, is reinforce those boundaries of light around you. Again, just reinforce it above you, below you, around you, every day. When you wake up, when you go to the bathroom, when you're sitting in traffic, when you are eating your lunch, when you are going to bed, reinforce this boundary. So important. I can't express that enough. So that is what I wanted to start off our evening with, is getting you back into that focus point from a spiritual point of view. Again, you've probably been working, you have kids to take care of, perhaps you're teaching in homeschool right now. Again, that's kind of a global thing, to being in traffic, dealing with family members that are in opposition to you. It doesn't matter. Just bring up that smoky quartz and put that energy in your pocket, in your mind's eye, and put up your boundaries of light around you to help integrate that energy in a nice, positive way, so that all of this nonsense that is happening doesn't impact you. For wherever you are, those of us who are in Oregon, West Coast, we're going back down into some very draconian lockdowns. And with that being said, it can't help but impact your feelings of being claustrophobic, of being in a cage, in a jail. And so when that happens, again, you go into your light, and then you go within yourself and your connection, and then that jail of lockdown will disappear, because that outside world can no longer impact who you are on the inside. And that's why being in this boundary of light is so crucial, so important to your well-being. Again, you don't have to be a religious person. This is not about religion. I am not a religious person per se. I know about it. I know actually quite a bit. However, I'm not a religious person. I'm very spiritual, very connected. So when you tap into the light of the universe and you put yourself in that light, this is how we change things. And this is how we do it, right? That old song. And that's why I impress this every single week, all the time, because for even those who know this and have worked with me, know this to be true, that we forget. We forget. So if you're feeling off, realign, realign, realign. Okay? So with that, I will go into my next topic. But I really want to start with that because this is so important. Now, today I wanted to talk about Atlantis. And why? Because Atlantis on the timelines are opposite of where we are. Atlantis was here during the time, the latter part at least, because Atlantis was around for, probably 20,000 years, actually. Maybe longer. And so when it went finally down beneath the waves, that time frame, which was in the sign of Leo astrologically or astronomically, versus where we are just moving into Aquarius on this side of the timelines. That time frame, again, like I said, mirrors where we are. So Atlantis and America mirror one another. We have this opportunity to change the timelines and to create a new timeline of not going beneath the waves. This is why I think it's so important. It's been in my consciousness so much. I brought it up in different lives. However, I want to go into it a bit deeper based on my own complete recall of a parallel lifetime. Now, for those who are new, I don't call them past lives because all time is simultaneous. So a parallel reality, another reason why this is so important. Atlantis and Aquarius are both Atlantis, America, Leo, Aquarius are both happening at the same time because the timelines are all happening. There are multiple realities playing out at any one given time. So that's why this is so important, because we mirror each other. The same players there are playing here, okay? That, parallel lifetimes. The other thing that is important to note before I go into my own parallel reality is that any given life is like what Joseph Campbell speaks to, which is the hero's journey. And we have the different stages in a hero's journey. We always have to go beyond the Cyclops to get to the end. We have a lot of Cyclops in our stories right now. We have a lot of really creepy, vile, negative, insipid creatures right now that are hitting the airwaves, hitting the media, hitting how the political structures, ruling the world, so to speak. And these vile, creepy figures, and yes, I will name some: Fauci, Bill Gates, Biden, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bushes, okay, just to name a few. These characters, these people that signed up for this role, if we didn't have those insipid characters in our story, it'd be kind of boring. I mean, imagine if we were watching Star Wars and Darth Vader. I laugh every time I think about this character. Imagine Darth Vader knitting. We'd be going, okay, can he stop knitting now? Can he do something? And it would get very, very boring. It'd be very tiring. Excuse me. So imagine if we didn't have these dark characters. These dark characters help us to focus on what it is we really want. What is it that we don't want to give up? What is it, such as our freedom? I don't want to give up my freedom, right? I don't want to do that. So they are the mirror, the catalyst for us to be non-committal, to step out of complacency, to be more proactive in our lives and in our surroundings. And so they show up to create a better story, to create a little more drama, to create the energy of where we're going. Because if everything were perfect and copacetic, we wouldn't have that same momentum. So back to Atlantis and America today, a lot of the players that were then are available now. So now to tell you, and I've never really shared this other than with a few personal friends, this timeline, this parallel life of mine in Atlantis. And at this moment, I used to remember my name, but I don't at this moment. I was a healer, so no big surprise that once again, the healer aspect or this healer archetype has shown up. And the only reason I'm sharing this lifetime is not to sound better than, or that I know my parallel lifetime at all. It's just to share the information and the story so you can understand the bigger dynamic of what's going on, and also because of the details will help you understand why, to me, Atlantis is such an important mirror to where we are, okay? So in that lifetime, I was a healer. My husband had been captured by, and I'm going to use the same names as we use today. We've got the Alliance, or the White Hats, and we've got the Black Hats, okay? This is not about prejudice, just an old Western concept, right? The Black Hats, the White Hats, okay? So in that time frame, the Black Hats had taken my husband and had put him and locked him away because he was incredibly scientific and knew a lot of how to do different programmings and tech and AI and everything that they needed to create some of their nefarious avenues, and he refused, so they then captured him rather than let him be in the public or private sector. So they put him away. Now we were, the two of us, able to still connect intuitively, psychically, telepathically. Now what happened in time, they started giving him more and more drugs to keep him from being able to do that. However, his underlying immense love for me, he was able to still telepathically transport the energy or the information to me. And towards the end, which I will eventually talk about, he was still able to tell me that he loved me, but he couldn't express much more. In the early times, he was still able to tell me what was going on behind the walls of secrecy, behind the walls of the black hats, if you will. There's that aspect. And then back to where my healing structure, my healing building, my healing site was, my center. In this healing center, it was just off the coast. When we think of Atlantis, we always think of the circular environments with the spokes going into the center. Where I was, and I think that there were many, many outposts like that from the what I would call the west coast of the United States and Bimini across the Atlantic over into Europe and into the, I guess we would call it the Middle East, and as far down as Antarctica. So there were many different outposts. I don't believe there was just one place of Atlantis, no differently than today. We have different communities. The community that I was in was on this, we were literally in the Atlantic. I was on the eastern side, I know that. It was, again, more of an island type environment. And I hope you don't mind, like when I look down, it's because I am remembering. And in this space, I was on the outer spoke of the wheel. And as I came in one of the spokes, which is where my healing center was, it was up on a cliff of sorts, because I had water running around it, and then there was a waterfall down that went to a river down below. And I was up here because the river actually wound underneath the healing center, and I utilized that river in the ceremonies and in the healing of the different individuals that would come to me. And I will get to the healing center. Then out here where the different spokes were, so much of the buildings actually were white. They used different types of quartz, and so they had a crystalline impact, so they would sparkle the walkways and the buildings, and a lot of the buildings were round, again in this round environment. There were lots of plants. It was very, I'm not going to say humid, but we had lots of plants so it was a very rich, forested, flowery environment. And so as you walked along the paths of town, because it was small in the sense, like communities today where we want to live in town where we can walk to everything, that's essentially how the community was set up. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't outbases out here, which there were, and we will get into that. So as I could walk on this outer pathway, because here's the ocean, I'm up on this hill, I hope you can see my hands, and then you can wind your way up to the upper cliffs where more of the city area was at that time. Different buildings, commerce, because we had commerce at that point in time too. So what would happen is what was happening at that time was similar to America in that censorship was happening. Benjamin Franklin quoted way back when, right, that we lose our freedom when censorship begins, and we've been in major censorship lockdown now for a good 2 years, but the last 6 months have been over the top. They're crazy. And at that time, the same things were happening. Censorship was happening. It was very rampant, thus my husband being taken away from me and not even being able to communicate. Fortunately, being psychic at that time as well, and the healer, he and I were able to until the very end. But up here on this hillside, again, different buildings, and then again commerce, and then you kept walking, and then beyond that were more houses where people lived, and then again more gardens, and then as you continue to walk out around, then we became more to the outpost. There were people that had boats and things that, and they were swift and fast. And so there was a shipping community, a boating, fishing, community that utilized the ocean, and then it wound its way around. Now these different spokes also had, sorry, I got hair in my mouth, also had different communities over here where people lived. And so we would communicate with different ones. Throughout these communities, these different ones, the white hats were saying, oh no, we don't want to lose our freedoms. We all started to connect. Now what happened through the communication or censorship, no differently than today, if anybody speaks out, for example, today there was a gal, don't ask me who it was, some Disney star over the weekend said, maybe we should check the elections, maybe we should look into this, maybe there's voter fraud. She got totally just slam dunked, okay? Same thing back then, because of people being slam dunked, I love the mirror, we all had to communicate very surreptitiously and undercover. Excuse me, we got to the point where we would communicate by walking past individuals, and we'd have different signals with the eye, the eye's hand, just where the hands would touch. We had to even be very carefully with our psychic telecommunications, and the reason is they could override, and they would send in bots or different psychics that would then hone in on us to capture what our thinking was, so that they could tune into what it is that we were planning, because we were definitely planning. We were planning the white hats shifting the outcome of where Atlantis was, no differently than today. Again, dark and light, and again, we always need the dark characters to propel us forward. The shadow always gives us impetus to improve, right? So again, I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying and explaining the narrative. So what we learned how to do is, down from my healing center, again, there was a pathway down to the ocean. We would meet down along literally where the waves hit, because for whatever reason, maybe the negative ions from the ocean itself would counterbalance or offset, let's put it that way, their infiltration psychically. Now, whether that's true today, if that's really true, I don't know. I just know it was true in that time. I have not tried it in this lifetime. It might be kind of fun to play around with to see if that really is the case. But we were down on the ocean. Again, this is the Atlantic Ocean. And we would meet, and we would telepathically communicate, as well as work on our hand signals, so we could start looking at what the overall dynamic was within the political structures of Atlantis. And I'm going to use Atlantis again as the overall name for all the communities. I happen to be on an island that definitely had I don't want to call it a capital, but it was a capital of sorts that had the scientific buildings and things that were going on, no differently than you have something in Washington, D.C., Chicago, LA, San Francisco, whatever. The same thing. We had the scientific buildings going on, but we also had the government buildings there as well. And there were people there that were connecting in with the other dark hats around the other islands, because again, they wanted full power. Once again, we are dealing with full power again. We would meet down here, and we got to a place that we recognized that we reached the critical point. We reached that apex, and we were not going to be able to save Atlantis. We weren't going to be able to save the community, the civilization as such. So from that point, we started making plans to send out outposts to outlying areas, to other islands, to mainlands. We literally sent ships and crystal ships to the coast of Central America and down into South America. There were ships that went out that helped to populate and seed different communities at that time. I'm going to go back. I want to go back for a second to the healing center that I had, because I remember when I had this recall of this lifetime, it was back in the 90s, and it was so vivid, and I had written it down actually, And I made a full story of it, and of course, through how many moves since then, it has subsequently disappeared, and of course, that computer is long gone. So this is all from memory of memory, right? One of those. And my healing center was, again, a round building, and it had water flowing through it. There was an area where you could have what I would almost call mud baths, where healing clay, where you could immerse yourself in the hot soils to help eradicate and pull out toxins. Then there was the water from the river that flowed around and under the building, and we had a section where the floor opened up so you could see the water, and then the water was outside as well, and you could literally swim in that section of the stream to wash off the mud. There was the next section there, it was like stained glass windows on the ceiling, and the sunlight would filter down through the ceiling, so then you would have the opportunity to go lie in the sun with the multicolored prism glass to really activate the chakras and the healing centers of the body. Very cool. I want to do this, right? And then this is the coolest aspect of all. There was a table, and the table it was long, and it was actually white as well. It was solid yet squishy, that you could lie in and it would form to your body. So it didn't matter if you were a man of 6'5" or a woman that was 4'5", didn't matter. It would still conform to your body because it just was that kind of tech that had that ability. Now, underneath in the structure of this table, or excuse me, of this chair, were different crystals, and the crystals then would activate your chakras, literally from your crown all the way to your root chakra. And then of course we have various tiny chakras within our body, so they would activate those as well. So each person would lie on this table, and then you had the sunlight filtering in, which is just fantastic. You're lying on this table, and then within a very short amount of time, now it's kind of formed and foamed to your body. What it would do, there were crystals, even though it was a round building, there were corners that were set up to the directions. These large major crystals were set up, and then there were various crystals that were lined up around the room as well. And once you were lying there, within a short amount of time, the crystals would start to activate the crystals within the healing chair. Keep wanting to call it table. And what it would do is then all of a sudden, don't ask me how this worked. I can see it, I can hear it, I can feel it, I can taste it. Music would be created from the crystals that came in and activated on the four corners and worked within the table as well. Did it again. I'm going to call it the table. Must be easier. On the table while you were lying on it. Now, what's so incredible is that the music that was created was specific to each individual. Every individual soul musical chart, if you will, was specific to that person. Now, what happens when you were on the chair, the discord that was felt in the body was then musically cleaned up as the crystals and the light and the colors would find the areas of discord, and then that music would play that would be a discordant sound until it corrected itself, and then the music, the sound would reharmonize your body. So each person could lie on that and just imagine the symphony of your body that would come off of this, I'm going to say it, the table. It was amazing. Now, as the healer, the person there to help facilitate all of this, I could see and I could hear the music as if it were solid in the air, and I could see the colors that were being generated from the crystals through the sunlight, through the stained glass windows in the sky, on the roof of the building, and through the sky. It's amazing. Think about if we had that kind of technology today. We have things that are similar, like the amethyst beds that you can lie on, and I think those are good. We just haven't tapped into the reality of that time frame yet. Eventually, I believe we will. I would love to talk to somebody who is so adept, so far advanced. And I'm going to segue for just a second. I do believe that we have the technology that is so much more advanced than we talk about. I believe that our tech on this planet is probably 300 years, if not more, advanced than we know. And they've kept it from us because, God forbid, humanity might wake up. What if humanity really knew what was going on? What if everybody go, oh my God, we have ETs on this planet. Oh my God, we have this tech. So that's another reason that we, you know, I'm segueing for a second because I get kind of cranky about the whole thing. But these are the kind of people that I would like to tap into. There would be a person, if I could find anybody within that secret space program that has that ability to tap into that kind of technology, I would love to pull them and say, okay, here's the spec. Here's what I want to create. What do you think? Right? Because if we could do it then, we can do it now. So my healing table, my healing center was phenomenal. And I've had that dream in my heart for, golly, probably 30 years. So back to Atlantis. See, I get caught up in the imagery of that healing center because it was so magnificent. So actually, before I segue to continue with Atlantis and what happened, what I would invite all of you to do now that you have a vision of what this feels like and looks like is to create that in your mind and create that table or that chair in your mind and activate that within yourself. You can also, while you do that, play music or the tones, the solfeggio tones, which are what Gregorian chants are based on. You can play that kind of background music to help activate your own healing because those do help clear out the chakras. Now, this isn't your specific musical tune, however, it will still help clean up your body because that's the most important piece right now is to activate. I would love to be your first client at Tina. Love you. I would love to have you be my first client. Wouldn't that be just amazing? So that is one of my dreams. I haven't given up on it for a very long time. So in the meantime, visualize this. There is also on my website, I have several downloads available, and one of them is a beauty meditation. And I mirrored my beauty meditation after my healing center. I've never revealed that to anybody other than close friends, husbands, that kind of thing, kids. So you can get that on my website. Just go to the beauty meditation and it can take you through that visualization. But it's based on my Atlantis experience. So back to Atlantis. I would meet down on the ocean with these different players, very much like today. I mean, I've been doing this dance for a very long time, and I think about all the different planets that I've lived on, other planets you guys have lived on, the different lifetimes we all have had. I believe that those who are listening are all part of the Lemurian culture because it taps something within you, a memory pattern. So we were what I would call the outliers. We were the rebels, if you will, saying, no, we're not going to give up our freedom. We're not going to turn our power over to technology. Sorry, I got tickled, over to AI. Now, along that line, I got to segue once again because I have to just keep telling you what I'm hearing, is what's interesting, you don't have to believe this, personally I do, is that time is nebulous. We have some very advanced souls that have traveled timelines that can be time travelers, and that supposedly, like a sci-fi movie, which a lot of sci-fi really isn't sci-fi, is we have time travelers that have come from the future back to us as I am talking about the past, to help us not lose our empathy, not lose our compassion, not lose our sense of love, which can be programmed out of the human brain through electrical stimulation, through viruses, through vaccines. And this new vaccine they're talking about supposedly has something that warps something in the brain, and it's something with chromosome 8 that removes empathy in our brains. So that's really great. We're creating a generation of cyborgs, of bots. Really, really crazy stuff. So again, back to Atlantis, those kinds of things were happening because that happened then. We don't want it to happen now. That's why we have these group memories of Atlantis. So we would gather down on the beach. Now what's interesting, I remember there was a guy that came in and did the infiltration. And he started hearing, obviously, because he came down as a rebel and started to infiltrate the rebels, if you will, the white hats. And we finally figured out that he was giving intel, and I can't, honestly, this is part of my story, I don't remember. Somehow we rid ourselves of this man or turned him into the white hats that had more power. But anyway, we got him out of our ranks. As we knew time was more imminent, that things were coming to a close, we knew that they were going to blow themselves up, because what happened, we started having more and more earthquakes because they were using the tech at the time to do all kinds of nefarious things, such as, like today, that's why they're such mirrors. We have different ones, different countries, including us in America, God forbid, in India and Russia and everybody else, that has detonated nuclear bombs within the earth. How, I was going to say, how effing stupid is that, really, if you think about it? We go into our planet and we detonate things. You think it's not going to disrupt the poles? You think it's not going to disrupt the equilibrium of the planet? Are you kidding me? So back to Atlantis, they were doing those kinds of testing, and we could start to feel the earthquakes starting to rattle the island. So we knew things were happening. Also, at that time, we had these little crystal ships, and they're not that small, but we had these crystal ships that we could travel in, and they had tech that, like computers today have crystals. They had crystals within crystals, and we could get in these. I think they sat like 4 people. I think maybe some of them got bigger to 8, and we could zip around with them. They would literally, they were like the Japanese trains where they were off the ground, and we could zip around in them. So we had some of those that we had pocketed away because they were starting to confiscate any kind of exit vehicles. So what we started to do is to tell the outlying areas to start leaving, so they would be under the radar. So a group of 2 people would disappear, a group of 4, sometimes maybe up to 6, but never large numbers, and they would take off and they would start going off to the outlying areas. Again, at that time, where I really see them going is more westward, so into America, Central America, South America. They were moving that way. We weren't moving necessarily east at that time, or north or south yet. So they were moving out. And at that time, I had 2 sons, the 2 sons that I have today, very important. And the man who was with me then was, I had a man who was with me that was very much like a grandfather figure. He was old as the hills at that time, but brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so he was with me as my support, my scribe, my intelligence, and he was also one of the guides within the nucleus of the rebels. He would then, because he could sort, he'd been on many, many different lifetimes, different planets. He just had that kind of wisdom that he would impart that within the circle of people, and give them ideas, instruction, things how to move into new communities. So what we started to do was plan that we had to exit the island because we knew it was coming. So I went to my healing center and basically had to leave it behind. I gathered what things and tools that I could. We gathered, seeds. We gathered, different kinds of tools that, besides my healing tools, literally tools that we could use when we moved and to create a whole new environment, right? So, and the elder sage, his name was Thorin, and he is my lifelong guide in spirit form at this time. He is still with me. I talk to him. I've been talking to him for decades. And he was with me and my 2 sons, and we basically told everybody to scatter. I had to say goodbye to my husband telepathically, and we literally left the island, and we skirted up above. And as we did, we were one of the last groups to leave because, again, for those who know me, I was a leader and hung in there and gave everybody well wishes and all of that, and set up tools so that we could still communicate with one another. Again, tools that we could utilize again in this life if we start implementing them within ourselves, believing that we have the ability to communicate telepathically over vast distances. We then, Thorin and my two sons, got above the waves as the waves started to, the last final desecration of the islands happened in the last earthquake, because Atlantis went down over several periods. It wasn't all at once. So the time frame of this, when I wrote this, I wrote 11,500 BC. Now, of course, at that time frame, did we use that time clock? Of course not. This is in context to where we are today. Now, what's interesting about that, and I will save that for a second. What's interesting, we'll go over here. Thorin and my two boys, we could look down and we could see it. Now, of course, we had the winds and everything was, impacting us in the air. Fortunately, because the technology, we were able to zip so quickly, and we went to the continent to the east of us, and we settled in there. Now, of course, there were settlements there that were on the mainland. Some of those were definitely more primitive. Egypt at that time had not really been started in the way that we think of it. And so I feel what eventually happened is my sons got older, because we were able to create a community, and there were others that then eventually joined us in this area. My sons eventually went to the Egyptian area because it was very fertile at that point in time to help start seeding society, even though it really didn't start till about 10,500 BC. But again, you move in there, you start settling in with the different tribes and things at that point in time. So that's what happened. We went under the waves, and Thorin and I stayed in that community until we left the planet, essentially. The black hats, so many of them went under the waves. There were those who escaped to the outer areas as well. Again, we always needed Darth Vader in the story, right? So that's why I feel Atlantis is very important. I do. I think it's very important to the timelines. Now, on a geological point of view, I've done research subsequently, and between 12,900 to 11,600 is known as the Younger Dryas period. That's when, ironically, the Earth was heating up, and, well, excuse me, it was cooling down, and yet we had the heating from the solar system, which created this the flooding and the melting of the caps at that point in time. So again, we had flooding, and the flooding that happened was it was all over the world. And this is not necessarily the Great Flood, but it could be the Great Flood. I've heard timing of the Great Flood, which is documented in every culture, is about 8,000. However, I'm really leaning more to this intuitively, because this is when the glaciers out of Alberta melted and came down through Montana and then through Oregon and Washington at that time, and created what we now have as the Columbia Gorge. So ironically, when I wrote that, I had no idea in terms of time. I had no idea that that's when the Younger Dryas period was, and we had this major flooding. So I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, if you think about it, I think what it did is it validated the information that I was given at that time. Now, if you think about, again, the black hats at that time and the black hats today, those who want to control, I wrote about this in my newsletter. I think there's some real truth in this, is that on a certain level, this power, this control that they want to inject over the planet is, in their terms, they're wanting to save us. Well, really, I think we can save ourselves. But they want to save us from going beneath the waves. Once again, my feeling, though, is that, ironically, because of this incredible control, this time that's not going to happen. We're not going to blow ourselves up. We've tried several times. ETs actually have come and stopped. You can look this up. They have actually stopped any kind of nuclear testing or nuclear bombs. The nuclear reactors have melted through the last several decades, and it's been proven when you start talking to the people in the space programs that it's because the ETs have come in and stopped the reactors from detonating, which is pretty fantastic. So are we going to blow ourselves up? No, because we are not going to be allowed to. There's a greater confederation out there helping us, because if we destroy the planet, which is what we would do, that not only affects and impacts this time, it impacts all the planets in our solar system and into the galaxy, but it also impacts timelines, meaning that it impacts right now all the other probabilities that are happening, and also our future probabilities and our future timelines. So thus our future selves have come back to help us from doing this. There was a show called Travelers out of Canada that I think has subsequently been canceled. And what they did, it was a similar storyline where travelers from the future came back. They talked about taking over people's bodies who were going to die anyway, whereas I believe that the travelers have come back and have been reborn into another body, but they are here with all memory intact so that they can help shift us. They can also be here energetically as well, because we are much more powerful and so much more creative than we can even believe in ourselves. So I think this is a real fascinating aspect of the bigger picture on what's going on and what's going down. So back to our black hats. Again, we have this global cabal in this time frame that want to lock us down. They are the bad characters. So rather than hate them, because if we think about it in terms of, because it's real easy to, I get so frustrated with them, I just shake my head, is that, remember at the end, Darth Vader shifted and changed. He said, I love you, essentially to Luke. So if we as people, as the white hats, as the rebels, instead of looking at them as these dark, nefarious creatures and vile, insipid idiots, okay, I can say all that because that's an observational truth, we can send them love as souls, because no matter what, they're going to have to pay for the karma. It's just the law of the universe. That is an undeniable law. What goes up comes down. What you put out, you're going to get back. So these souls that have been disconnected from their emotional pieces of who they are going to have to pay. It's just what is. So do I believe that they're going to be caught? Yes, because I believe that Atlantis and those of us who were on Atlantis will not let this happen. We got to that apex and we couldn't stop it. Right now, we are at that apex once again on the timelines. We are at this crossroads where we're either going to go under the waves, or we're going to say, no, we're going to create a whole new timeline from which to operate. We are going to create a timeline where, yes, we always have a few sketchy characters out there. However, we're not going to let you be in control. You can go do your own demise over there. Or we're going to come over here and we're going to create this timeline where we are in unity consciousness, where we help one another, where we support one another. Even if we shake hands and say we agree to disagree, you can be my neighbor, you can be my lover, my partner, my husband, my wife, whatever it is, we can agree to disagree on these things and still work towards cohesiveness. And that's why Atlantis is such an important aspect to our timelines right now, to remember what happened, to understand what happened and why, how far we went, too far we went, and how at this time when we all are engaged, when we are sharing the love. And I'm going to share this for just, I may have brought this up before, but I'm going to bring this up right now. Sheila, she's in the chat. Sheila took this time and has written this new beautiful book of poetry. She took this time to really embrace the positivity in life, to bring joy and love, to share that with others. That's how we change it. You can still know she's still engaged in what's going on, and yet you can still bring it back into the love and the positive transformation. That's what we have to do, and that's how we create this new timeline, which I believe we are already in. Now, here's something very interesting on us. This is in alignment to what I'm talking about and also separate. I have been listening to The Law of One. That was a channeled book. There were several books back in the 80s. And it's high vibrational frequency information. And it's a collective, a group consciousness collective. So they are this group, so it's all of us. Imagine all of us as a collective. All our memories are merged, and then all of our knowledge, all of our wisdom is merged. That's what a group consciousness collective is, and they were the ones sharing. What they were talking about back in the 80s, that this time frame was coming up, they voiced 2011, so close to 2012. We missed that as a collective. I think that frequency happened on the planet of this awakening because we have to awaken the population. We have to wake up to our greater selves. We have to wake up to our intuitive and intellectual capabilities. We have to wake up to what's really being played out. It's like the Matrix when they were given the blue pill or the red pill. Most people today want the blue pill. We got to take the red pill, folks. We absolutely have to. And what Ra was saying, yes, it can be likened to the god Ra in Egypt. However, that was more of a hijacked personality than what Ra is in this book. Okay, the Egyptians hijacked that. So what they talked about in this, that there would be 75,000 years. There are 75,000 year cycles, and we are at the end of one. And have we reached enough consciousness to be able to move into the next frequency? You have a lot of people talking about 5-dimension, 5D. That, folks, is erroneous. That's not happening because we cannot skip 4th dimension. 4th dimension is going through heart. I talked about that last week. So if we don't reach that group consciousness, those who don't understand and embrace this higher connection to source, the divine consciousness, to their, like I said, the intellect and their intuitive self, and come from a place of being of service versus service to self, well, guess what? Lucky them gets to repeat a 75,000 year cycle in 3D consciousness. I don't know about you. I'm done with that. I don't want to do that. I want to move into that next frequency. I want to move to the next hierarchy, that next level of higher dimensional frequency. I don't want to repeat 75,000 years of repeat Groundhog's Day. I don't know about you. It doesn't sound like fun. The one positive is that, like Bill Murray, he learned how to play piano, he learned languages, and all those fun things. So we can learn all of those things, which we do take with us. But that's why this time frame, this intersection in time is so important. It's why you chose to be here, is so that we don't make the mistakes of the past, that we recognize how important it is to be conscious with our thoughts, with our thinking, to be self-reflective, to go in and clear out the clutter in your emotional closets. Where are you still not releasing old things? Where have you not forgiven others? Where is it that you withhold your love? I can keep going, right? All of those things that we need to look at within ourselves. When we do that, we are able to raise our consciousness enough so that we're not part of that 75,000 grouping, that 75,000 years repeat pattern of souls that will do that if they haven't reached it. Now, this sounds like a judgment, and I don't mean it to sound like a judgment. However, for all of those who are so stuck, that are so turned to the past, who are unwilling to open their minds to new thought, unwilling to look ahead with love and dignity, and instead turn to the past and focus on patterns and beliefs that no longer serve us, that do not support humanity, that do not support unity. When you go into socialism and communism, that just does not support freedom. Those souls love them, but more than likely will repeat that 75,000 year cycle. God love them. For those of us who are creating this new timeline, we will move then into the next octave, the next million years, essentially, of development, of growth, of expansion, of change, of opening our heart centers, creating higher dimensional frequency relationships where we come from love, where you're, here we have such a distorted relationship connection, distorted sexual energy. When we move into higher frequencies, we wouldn't do anything to hurt other people. We would always come from that place of love first. We have to look at ourselves and come from that level. That's what we're creating. That's what these new timelines are. So this apex, if you look at in your life, where are you at this crossroads? Where is it that you can make sure that you're heading north? And if there are any things left on that intersection that need to be reviewed, need to be looked at, now is the essential time, right now, between now and the solstice, the 21st of December. The reason I say this is because we just had a new moon in Scorpio, so that's all about emotion. We have the full moon which is when things come to fruition on the 30th of this month. And then the solstice is, of course, has always been a very integral part in all culture, but it is a time of 3 days of darkness, of quiet. And when that happens, we have these solar alignments that have not happened in 6,000 years. That's big. So if you clear out anything that is still being harbored in your heart, any old stories, again, any emotional blockages that you could literally pull out, put on the table like you're looking at an old photo album, and you're going through it going, oh, you know, that person really pissed me off. I'm going to send them love. And just keep going through it so that by the time the solstice happens, you are ready to graduate to the next level. You are ready to graduate to fourth dimension. The planet's already there. The planet is actually helping us to graduate. She migrated or transitioned into fourth dimension back in the 80s. We as a collective consciousness, as a species, kind of like the dinosaurs, we have not collectively moved to that level yet. That's why this awakening is so essential. The awakening of consciousness, the recognition of really looking not only at ourselves in the mirror, but looking at all the symbols in our life, and also looking at the outer world as symbolic of the worlds in which we live. You know, the politics, the politicians, who do they represent in our lives? As an example, for some people, Trump is part of the dark team. He's really not. He comes from a higher Christ consciousness. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate that. So when you look at these players, as an example, Trump is the archetype of the father. So we have to look at those. How are you with the archetypes in your world? Have you cleared out any of those old hurts within you of the archetypes that have been in your family, which again, the outer world represents? So the more you're willing to do the work, not go into comatose, and really sit with it, meditate, visualize, walk in nature, exercise. Because actually when you exercise really quickly and hard, if you're a good skier or if you're on a motorcycle or if you're a tennis player, whatever it is you have to be so in that moment, you're totally in your zen. So when you're done with that, then you can let things go. So anything, gardening, cooking, all of these things are avenues for letting things go because you can get into that nice peaceful state. So meditation, we always are told in today's world it has to be perfect. No, 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 no. In my world, there is no one path. There are multiple roads to doing that and doing your inner work. So that is my invitation to all of you, so that again, at this crossroads, collectively, we all do it and we hold hands with as many souls as possible so that there is a group that moves into the next level. So I hope that makes sense. I want to just make sure that I wrote about all these different things, so I didn't want to forget. So just let me check my notes before we say goodnight. I got that one. Groundhog's Day. Oh, I got one more thing to share. Now, for those of you who get my newsletter, you probably already know this one, but I had this visual the other day that was so vivid. It was so cool. I was high all day, literally. Who needs drugs when you can just get high, right? And in fact, I've never done drugs in my life because of it, because I'm out there anyway. Anyway, what I saw was, and again, for those who've heard this, I apologize, but I saw this net, much like a fishing net, right, that went up and over, and there were, and what I keep seeing are three, but, excuse me, there were probably more, angelic beings of light beings, and it's like their outer hand had swords of light, like no nonsense, and they had gathered up all of these dark, nefarious people. So to me, it was such a symbolic representation of the fact that we are going to get past this, that we are not going to be stuck in these old draconian ways, because again, the light of the United States, if it shines, will then start shining around the world, like into Tina's world in Canada, and to, Richard's not with us tonight, but into New Zealand, because New Zealand and Canada there are a lot of things that are going on very draconian behind the scenes there. So when I see these characters, and I got to segue for 2 seconds in a minute on that. I don't want to forget about Trudeau, that they were being lifted off the planet and out of our frequency. There were those who were left behind in these cells where they no longer were able to communicate, much like how my husband had been in Atlantis when he could no longer could communicate with me telepathically, which is amazing. Again, the mirrors. I find it very fascinating. I also find it fascinating that my sage was with me. Thorin is still with me today. So again, there are no accidents. Now, why I want to segue to Trudeau is that Trudeau is also involved, has been connected, this is today's stuff, with the, why did I just go, the voting system. What's it, the software, I just went, it'll come to me. The voting system, the software that has been able to be manipulated, Trudeau's been involved with that. So it's probably where the elections have been manipulated in Canada to Venezuela. So it's not just for here in the United States, which I find very fascinating. Just information that I think everybody needs to know. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here. I love you all. Send you out with love and light. Please think about the healing table or the healing chair and visualize it. Again, if you're not good at that, just go pick up they're cheap on my website, the beauty visualization, because it really walks you through it. So thank you, Sheila. Love you, love you. And oh, Shelly's with us tonight. Oh, aren't you fabulous? Hi, Shelly. Shelly's in Utah. Is a paladin. Oh, that's a great question. I'm hearing yes. I am hearing yes. Because I've never been asked that question, so I didn't have an answer. So the answer that I'm hearing is yes. So I think it's very fascinating. Shelley, I appreciate you being here. This might have been a little bit outside your belief system, and for maybe a few other viewers that outside their belief system, and that's okay. I think the more we open our mind to the bigger consciousness, for one thing, I just want to say for those who might not believe everything I've said, what's fascinating is, and those who know me have heard this 1,000 times, the conscious mind can deny other lifetimes and other experiences, but the subconscious mind absolutely undeniably irrefutable cannot. It just cannot. So the greater expanse is all within ourselves. So anyway, thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for being here. I send you all love and light, and have a great week. And remember to protect yourself with smoky quartz. Love you. Night.